everywhere. GBS.
Good afternoon to you all. This is the ambassador. With me, your ambassador, Jennifer Macau. Today, our first story is going to come from the NATO summit. As at the NATO summit in Washington this week, the alliance made significant move to support Ukraine and counter Russia's aggression. The key developments included NATO's pledge for $43 billion in military aid for Ukraine over the next year, underscoring the alliance commitment to the Kiev's fighting against the Russian invasion. The US and Germany announced plans to deploy advanced long-range weapons, including the SM-6 missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and hypersonic weapons in Germany as well, starting in 2026, marking a major escalation in NATO's military posture in Europe. Here is the report.
As President Joe Biden welcomed NATO leaders to Washington for the alliance's 75th anniversary summit, the United States and Germany announced a major deployment of long-range weapons, with the U.S. agreeing to begin episodic deployments of advanced fire capabilities, including SM-6 missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and developmental hypersonic weapons in Germany starting in 2026. NATO also pledged to provide Ukraine with 40 billion euros in military aid over the next year, as leaders declare that Ukraine's path to NATO membership is irreversible, and concerns grew over deepening ties between Russia and North Korea.
An overwhelming bipartisan majority of Americans understand that NATO makes us all safer. The fact that both Democratic and Republican parties are represented here today is a testament to that fact.
As the NATO summit concluded, the U.S. and its allies made clear their determination to bolster Ukraine's defenses and deter further Russian aggression. Even as tensions rise with China over its support for Moscow, the deployment of long-range American weapons in Germany represents a significant escalation in NATO's military posture on the continent.
The United Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, announced that F-16 fighter jets from Denmark and Netherlands would be sent to Ukraine in the coming weeks. This represented a major capability of boost for Ukraine, which has been long relying on the Soviet-era aircraft against Russia invasion. Blinken also promised an incredibly robust NATO package that will build a well bridge to the Ukraine's potential NATO membership. However, reports suggested that Ukraine may be voiced to corrupt to join the NATO this time, though the transfer of the advanced F-16s being a priority for Ukraine, while Russia was accused NATO of escalating the conflict. Here's the report.
A strong, independent Ukraine, increasingly integrated with Euro-Atlantic institutions like the European Union, like NATO, and that is able to stand on its own feet, militarily, economically, democratically. And what we see is Ukraine on a trajectory to do just that. Militarily, we have an incredibly robust package that will be unveiled over the next couple of days at NATO that builds a very clear, strong, robust, well-lit bridge to NATO membership for Ukraine, including, as you mentioned, the first time NATO's dedicated a command to helping an aspiring country join the alliance. This, in and of itself, is extraordinary. Just a few weeks ago, President Biden signed our bilateral security agreement with Ukraine. At the last NATO summit, on its margins, President Biden brought together more than 30 countries to negotiate and now sign these bilateral security agreements. What does that mean? It means that for the next decade, country after country has vowed to help Ukraine build its deterrent and defense capacity. That sends the strongest possible message to Vladimir Putin that he can't outlast Ukraine, he can't outlast Ukraine's partners. I'm also pleased to announce that as we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands, and those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against the Russian aggression.
Thank you.
United States President Joe Biden has called on the NATO allies to invest in their industrial base and defend the production capabilities. Biden stated that Russia was rapidly ramping up weapons and munitions production with the help from China, North Korea, and Iran. The president underlined that NATO could not fall behind, and all members were now pledging to develop plans for increased domestic defense, that is manufacturing. The new commitment, according to Biden, demonstrated NATO's united resolve to keep the alliance strong and ready to defend its territory. The president noted that the U.S. had already invested $30 billion to boost its own defense production across 35 states. Biden stated that strengthening the industrial base was a critical step to maintaining NATO security and allowing the alliance to be more innovative and competitive in the production of vital equipments. Here comes the report.
Today, we're stronger than we've ever been. Since I took office, we've doubled the number of battle groups in NATO's eastern flank, and the United States has. Finland and Sweden have joined the alliance. Today, we have to ask ourselves, what is next? How can we keep making the shield stronger? One answer must be to strengthen our industrial base. Right now, Russia is on a wartime footing with regard to defense production. They're significantly ramping up their production of weapons, munitions, and vehicles. And they're doing it with the help of China, North Korea, and Iran. We cannot, in my view, we cannot allow the alliance to fall behind.
First session, we will make decisions for our future security. We will strengthen our defense. 23 allies now meet the target of spending 2% of GDP on defense, up from just 3 allies in 2014 when we made the pledge to invest more in defense. We will increase.
More coming from the same. NATO and the Ukrainian leaders met on Thursday in Washington, with NATO firmly declaring Ukraine's path to NATO membership as irreversible. However, a specific timeline for Ukraine accession was not approved, as NATO emphasized the need for Ukraine to first address the corruption and implement key reforms. Published pro-Ukraine supporters held protests calling for the country to be admitted to the NATO alliance as the 75th anniversary summit concluded in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, claiming having Ukraine in NATO would make them stronger and safer. The summit also saw NATO strongly condemning China's support for Russia's war in Ukraine, calling on Beijing to cease such enablement. Generally, the NATO summit demonstrated the alliance continued backing for Ukraine, through the timeline for its membership still remains uncertain.
My name is Catherine, and I am a volunteer with Ukraine Defense Support. I live in the DC area, and I'm here to let decision makers know that Americans want Ukraine in NATO. Having Ukraine in NATO will make us stronger and will make us safer. What does NATO exist for, if not for this exact situation? A dictatorship trying to invade Europe and the free world. Ukraine is protecting all of us, and if we want freedom to survive, we have to stick together. So as an American, I strongly support inviting Ukraine to join NATO. I think it's a necessary step for our future here in America.
We're here because this is the annual NATO summit. I'm here with friends of Ukraine, members of the local Ukraine community, who are encouraging the United States to keep helping Ukraine.
The Russian Defense Ministry reported that a Ka-52M helicopter completed combat missions in the South Donetsk direction. Footages show the helicopter taking off, firing missiles, and returning to the airfield. The aircraft commander claiming that the Ka-52 crew had previously struck the Western hardware. Russia launched its military offensive in Ukraine in late February 2022 after recognizing the independence of Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic, citing Kiev's failure to guarantee their special status under the 2014 Minsk Agreement. Moscow has urged Ukraine to declare itself officially neutral and give assurances that it would never join NATO. The date and the location of the footage published by the Russian Defense Ministry could be independently verified, while the Ukrainian side has not commented on this matter.
Сегодня была поставлена боевая задача на уничтожение живой силы противника, которая окопалась в лесном массиве в ротном опорном пункте на южнодонецком тактическом направлении. Экипажем была поставлена боевая задача. 2 установлена зарекомендовавшая уже себя ракета «Вихрь». Значит, по ее тактико-техническим данным,
Tragedy struck off Turkey's Aegean coast as migrant life raft allegedly abandoned by Greek authorities crashed into rocks near Sesame, resulting in the death of 7 people. The Turkish Coast Guard launched a rescue operation, recovering the survivors from the sinking raft and the nearby island of Karada. The incident has reignited tensions over migrant policies between Turkey and Greece, with the accusations of the pushbacks amidst ongoing efforts to stem illegal crossing into Europe. Let's get the report.
18 survivors, among them children, were rescued from the nearby island of Karada after the raft sank following the collision with rocks. Search and rescue operations are ongoing as one person remains missing, the Coast Guard confirmed in a statement. According to survivors, they had been placed in the life raft and left adrift by Greek authorities close to Turkish territorial waters. The raft subsequently struck rocks near Kesme before sinking. Turkey has frequently accused Greece of conducting pushbacks, a practice of instantly returning migrants without due process, which violates international asylum laws. In contrast, Greece denies such allegations and maintains its commitment to international humanitarian obligations. Interior Minister Ali Elikaya shared a video on the social media platform X depicting Turkish Coast Guard vessels rescuing migrants, including children from the island of Karada. The rescued individuals were reported to be in good health by the Coast Guard.
Tensions in South Sudan are escalating as crucial peace negotiations risk collapse due to a controversial new security law that threatens to undermine the years of diplomatic efforts. The talks convened in Kenya are gearing completion, and extensive dialogue between government officials and the rebel factions have hit a major roadblock. Opposition groups are vehemently opposing a recently passed bill allowing detention without arrest warrants, sparking an international concern and jeopardizing the country's fragile path to stability. Listen to the report.
Has played host to high-stakes negotiations between South Sudanese government officials and rebel opposition groups excluded from a pivotal 2018 peace agreement. The talks aimed at solidifying peace in a nation scarred by a 5-year civil war that claimed 400,000 lives and displaced millions have recently encountered a formidable obstacle. Pagan Amum Okiech, representing the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance, voiced strong opposition to a newly passed National Security Act. In an interview with the Associated Press on Tuesday, Amam asserted that signing an agreement under the shadow of this draconian law would render it meaningless. The legislation approved by Parliament last week grants authorities powers to detain individuals without arrest warrants, drawing widespread criticism for its potential to curtail civil liberties. Human Rights Watch joined the response of condemnation, urging President Salva Kiir to veto the bill. The organization cautioned that its enactment could support national security agencies notorious for human rights abuses, excavating existing vulnerabilities in the fledgling peace process. Dubbed Tumaini, Swahili word for hope, the talks have yielded a tentative agreement seeking to extend South Sudan's transitional period. The proposed accord also recommends postponing the country's first ever elections, slated for December 22nd, to allow finalizing the constitution, electoral laws, and establishing constituency borders and a unified security force.
Kenya's Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi disclosed that approximately 730 Kenyans who had been deported from various countries had been readmitted into Kenya since 2022. Mudavadi approved a breakdown stating that 186 Kenyans were readmitted in 2022, 378 in 2023, and 166 so far in 2024. Mudavadi also revealed that since 2022, 316 Kenyans had tragically passed away in Gulf states, with the highest number of deaths, which were talking of the number of 166 in number, occurring in Saudi Arabia. Other countries recording Kenya's fatalities, including Qatar, with 58, the UAE rating 51, Iraq rating 25, Bahrain 10, and Kuwait 6. Mudavadi noted that a presence of 4,016,548 Kenyans in the Gulf state, acknowledging the figure might be higher due to the unregistered citizens. He reassured Kenyans abroad of the government's commitment to protecting the rights and the welfare and the office of the enforced bilateral labor agreements.
In 2022, there were 186 deportees. In 2023, there were 378. In 2024, there are 166. So a total of 730 deportees are on record since 2022 to date. We are yet to get the accurate data on the Kenyans who have died in detention. So that figure at this point in time is not available, but we'll be ready to avail it once we have the accurate figure on that particular aspect.
And that international news brings us to our very first break. We have more lined up for you, topics you can't afford to miss. Stay tuned with us.
Because those people, let's commend them on their quality. Sana their music videos quality na anga top notch.
Kwa artist atakuwa msanii. Usiingie usienda kwa studio kwanza kurecord ngoma bila kuwa educated about music. Juu sasa utaingia hapo urecord ngoma yako vizuri alafu
yo utakuwa umegain kila kitu but pia label uyachangi hivyo. Yeah, we helped you so you are supposed to
do something.
Yeah.
Kiingia unapangwa contract. Unajua contract inakonga between two parties. Mnaagria under one thing, kila mtu analeta interest zake, then mnaangalia vile mtapata.
We have talent in the ghettos, but manze usanii ni ngumu, designer wise endelea.
True. Manze mimi niliona movie ya Kenya je. Na movie ilikuwa ina trend. Walitumia Land Rover hizi za kitambo, hizi chuma, hizi
yeah. Mtu akisenza audio kitu ni ya uongo.
Umeelewa kabisa.
Form 1 kuna msemehando akasema yeye ni artist. Akaambia kuja hapa bro. Unichore pilipili na ukali yake.
But the pilipili part sawa, but now how the ukali part.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back. You are still watching The Ambassador, GBS Global, and we are glad to have you join us today. Moving on, Zimbabwe is grappling with a severe malnutrition crisis exacerbated by devastating drought, with nearly half of the population requiring urgent aid, according to Emmerson Mnangagwa, the president of Zimbabwe, declaring a state of disaster in May, appealing for $2 billion to address the crisis. Through the drought causing a widespread crop failures, with 40% of crops performing poorly, besides 60% being completely lost. Here's the full report.
The World Food Programme and American Aid Agency are aiming to help some of the 2.7 million people in Zimbabwe threatened with hunger because of the drought that has enveloped large parts of southern Africa since late 2023.
Children experiencing poorer diets, decreasing access to water, sanitation, hygiene, can very quickly lead to increased levels of wasting and malnutrition and death. And we're trying to front load our responses right now so that we can avert such excess deaths in the months to come.
It has scorched the crops that tens of millions of people grow themselves and rely on to survive. Zimbabwe, neighboring Zambia and Malawi has reached crisis levels. The drought has reached Botswana and Angola to the west, and Mozambique and Madagascar to the east.
And so school attendance and support through the feeding programs that we have, on which we work with the government and other development partners, become extremely important for us at this time. School feeding program.
A year ago, much of this region was drenched by deadly tropical storms and floods. It is in the midst of a vicious weather cycle, too much rain and not enough. It is a story of the climate extremes that scientists say that are becoming more frequent and more damaging, especially for the world's most vulnerable people. The food distribution is part of a program funded by American Aid Agency and United Nations World Food Program. Many won't get that help, as aid agencies also have limited resources amid a global hunger crisis and a cut in humanitarian funding by government.
According to the search results during a State Department press briefing on July 9, 2024, the U.S. Department spokesperson Matthew Miller was asked to comment on a report from the medical journal, The Lancet, that estimated the death toll from Israel's recent war on Gaza that could exceed 186,000 people, representing nearly 8% of Gaza's pre-war population. When asked about this figure, Miller acknowledged that the reported number of the civilian deaths was unacceptable and that the situation represented a horrific human tragedy. Our next story gives you the full report.
Fair enough. When asked about this figure, Miller acknowledged that the reported number of civilians' deaths was unacceptable and that the situation represented a horrific human tragedy. However, a reporter then accused Miller of smirking as he made these remarks, which Miller denied.
Expert took into account indirect deaths, that have happened thus far and may happen as a result of the war, including disease and other things and starvation.
So
I aware of that?
I have seen the report, and I will just say whatever the number of civilians that have actually died as a result of this conflict, we know that it's far too many. Yeah. And far too many civilians have been needlessly killed as a result of this conflict. And that is why we are working so hard, including negotiations that are going on this week, to try to reach a ceasefire that would alleviate the suffering in Gaza, that would...
The Secretary got into it in public.
That was a different time. We're in the middle of some very intense negotiations over this right now. That was when we first received a response back from Hamas that we are characterizing. We are in the middle of some pretty delicate, sensitive negotiations right now about a path forward, and I don't want to say anything that could potentially jeopardize those.
So you can't say, or you're not willing to say, if Hamas has dropped any of its demands that were made about a month ago.
I just don't want to speak.
Miller reiterated the U.S. government position that it has urged Egypt to support effort for a just peace in Ukraine based on upholding Ukraine's sovereignty. In a separate development, the research result noted that Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with U.S. Middle East envoy Brett McGurk to discuss a potential ceasefire deal for Gaza, as well as the release of hostages amid ongoing negotiations broken by the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar. The meeting was held amid renewed Israel-Hamas negotiation in Doha, broken by U.S., Egypt, and Qatar.
Let us look on the UK relations with Russia, as Prime Minister Starmer met with President Zelensky of Ukraine at the NATO summit in Washington, stating that Ukraine had agreed to allow Ukraine to use long-range Storm Shadow missiles. The missiles will be used for the defensive purposes per international law through the decision of deployment resting with Ukraine. Zelensky thanked that the UK also urging of the limitations of the weapons would be lifted, while Kremlin warned against UK against approving strikes into Russia. Part of the broader NATO discussions was on supporting Ukraine against Russia through the UK decision, signaling its continued support for the nations in its defense against Russia.
And to be able to have this early opportunity to say again that, as you know from the get-go, there is no reduction in our support.
All the messages from your government and team and from people in
United Kingdom, we are very thankful for your words and steps, which were important. Thank you that you are with us from the very beginning of the war.
The UK-Rwanda deal to deport asylum seekers has come to an end, with the UK government vowing to scrap the controversial scheme. However, the Rwanda's deputy government spokesperson clarified there was no stipulation for the funds to be returned. The agreement, which costed the British government $300 million, aimed to deter migrants from raising their lives on a journey to illegally enter the UK, deporting them to Rwanda. Court battles ensuring that yet not deportation flights are taking off to date. Let's get the full report.
Rwanda's deputy government spokesman, Alan Mukarinda, stated that the funds were used for specific actions and there's no requirement for them to be returned. He also confirmed that the permanent dwellings built for the deported asylum seekers will now be used by Rwandans.
The treaties do not require the return of the money. This must be clear. Secondly, the UK government itself has not complained so far because it's not included in the agreements and it's not a loan we received from them. In fact, we are not in a position to return their money because there is no article in the treaties that Rwanda has failed to comply with.
Meanwhile, Botswana revealed that the UK government approached them to receive migrants deported from the UK, following reports of similar initiatives in other countries like Armenia, Ivory Coast, and Costa Rica. As the UK government scraps the Rwanda deportation scheme, Rwanda remains open to negotiations and solutions to address the issue of migration in a humane and cooperative manner.
The United States President Joe Biden is facing growing pressure from within his own Democratic Party to withdraw from the 2024 presidential race amid his concerns about his ability to defeat Republican opponent Donald Trump. Late Wednesday, Senator Peter Welch and the Vermont became the first Democratic senator to publicly call on Biden to exit the campaign, citing the president's disastrous debate performance against Trump. Two House Democrats, Pat Ryan and Al Bloomer, also urged Biden to withdraw from his candidacy. Let's get the report.
Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who is stopping short of demanding Biden's withdrawal, said it's up to the president to decide whether to stay in the race. Pelosi emphasized that time is running short for Biden to make a definitive choice. Adding to the growing doubts, Hollywood star George Clooney, a major Democratic fundraiser, wrote in a New York Times opinion piece that Biden should drop out of the race. The charges come as the 81-year-old Biden hosts NATO leaders in Washington. The president has vowed to continue his campaign and dismiss suggestion of cognitive decline, describing his debate showing as a bad episode. On Thursday, Biden is expected to hold a press conference where his mental acuity will be cross-scrutinized by the public and his party. Meanwhile, the Republican House Oversight Committee has subpoenaed 3 senior White House aides to question them about Biden's health and fitness for office. The growing call for Biden to withdraw underscores the mounting concern with the Democratic Party about the president's electability and the potential impact of his candidacy on the party's changes of the retaining White House and Congress in.
At least 12 school children and their driver were killed in a horrific minibus crash in South Africa's Gauteng province on Wednesday morning. The minibus, which was transporting students from the local schools, was allegedly struck from behind by a pickup truck, causing it to overturn and burst into flames. 7 other children were injured and rushed to the hospital. Gauteng's Education Minister Matome Chialome expressed profound sadness over the tragic event that has dealt with a devastating blow to the community. Here is more on the same.
Tragedy struck in South Africa as a number of school children and their driver were killed in a horrific road crash. Local officials say the minibus transporting the children to school was struck from behind by a pickup truck, causing the vehicle to overturn and catch fire. The victims were students from 2 schools in a town located west of the country's largest city. Several other children were injured and taken to the hospital. South Africa has a major road safety crisis, with thousands of people killed on the country's roads each year. This latest accident is a devastating blow to the community, as the Minister of Education expressed profound sadness over the loss of these young lives. Authorities are investigating the cause of the crash.
And that international news brings us to the end of our Ambassador GBS Global. It's been a pleasure having you on board, joining us to the end. Here at the Ambassador, we continue to bring you the latest updates and the global developments as you keep it locked with us. Have been your Ambassador, Jennifer Macau, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at the Ambassador tomorrow, same time, same place at 1 p.m. I wish you all the most beautiful and a wonderful afternoon. Stay safe.
Everywhere, GBS.